In this video, we're going to reveal how we built a Powerhouse email newsletter with over 30,000 weekly readers and why building one could potentially be game-changing for your business. So over the years, email marketing really became solidified as the king of content marketing. And with that, newsletters became more than just sending out emails. They became their own, almost like mini media companies. Take the case of Insider Inc. buying a majority share of the Morning Brew for about $75 million, and then CRM tool HubSpot bought The Hustle for around $25 million. Now, HubSpot's reasoning for the acquisition really says a lot about how email newsletters have become their own mini media empires. They said, by acquiring The Hustle, we'll be able to better meet the needs of these scaling companies by delivering educational, business, and tech trend content in their preferred formats. They went on to say, Sam and his team have a proven ability to create content that entrepreneurs, startups, and scaling companies are deeply passionate about, and I'm excited to bring them on board to take that work to the next level. So if an audience is the best type of asset that you can get in an online business, then an audience in an email newsletter where they regularly show up is the best type of audience to have. With this audience, you have the contact information of each individual, and the data can't be taken away from you like on other third-party platforms like on Google, Facebook, or Amazon. So with an email newsletter, you have the opportunity to turn what could be just a group of customers or followers into a club of raving fans. There's a difference between just emailing your audience and having an entertaining email newsletter. And we're saying this based upon our personal experience from having honestly a pretty boring newsletter to one that actually engages our community and allows us to interact with them. So let's talk about our first newsletter. Our old newsletter was called the Friday Content Wrap-Up, and it featured 4 pieces of content that were produced that week, and we would write an introduction with a description of each piece of content, and further down that email we would have sections with those descriptions again. So there were a few problems with that email. The first is that it repeated itself. So in the first half of the email, we then included that information again in the second half of the email. So it was essentially an email that had twice the amount of information. And it was also very predictable. It always pulled from information that we posted on the blog. So if there were any people reading the blog and then they saw the email, they would know exactly what to expect. So that resulted in people reading only about half of the email and about a 3% click-through rate. So in 2021, we decided to revamp that email newsletter to help us to achieve our business goals. And this is the first part, if you're going to build an email newsletter for yourself, is to define what those business goals are for you and how an email newsletter serves those purposes. So for us, the first was to boost our other content. So we shared content not only from our blogs, but also from the Opportunity podcast, from our YouTube channel, from some of the documentary type films that we put out, and pretty much pulling content from everywhere else that we were active and we wanted to send people to, but also to provide our audience a more holistic view of the online space because of everything that we were reporting on. Now, to see if our efforts were effective, we tracked metrics such as click-through rate, the number of signups that we had, new social media followers and subscribers, and our email shares. Our second goal, number 2, was to engage and promote a community. So if you have a community, a newsletter can be a great medium for how members can keep in touch with that community. You can share the most popular conversations or weekly events, kind of like on a community bulletin. And this is also a great way to get non-members to see what's going on in our community to get more member signups. Number 3 is to share product and service updates. So a newsletter can also act as a medium to share the product or service updates that are happening with the features within your business. So this can be a great tool, especially for SaaS companies where you're constantly putting out new features or updating the product to resolve any issues. And also this connection with your existing customer base can inform how you iterate on your products because it allows you to speak with those customers about what types of features or iterations they would like to see. Number 4 was to share deals and product launches. And running promotions can almost act like a reward to your audience for those who do stay tuned into the newsletter and continue to read it. And number 5 is brand love, or just focusing on how to pretty much take people from just customers to fans. And you do that by not always focusing on converting your audience to paying customers. You do that by offering information that's engaging, that's that's entertaining or that's useful to them in some way where you're not asking for anything from them, you're just providing value. And it's for this reason that our emails have a 47.6% open rate and a 96.7% read rate. So in our case, on our This Week in M&A newsletter, this is how we have it set up. So first we have a section called the trend of the week. So every week we open the email with a trending topic, and usually this is meant to give a business idea right off the bat. So in this section, we talk about some data that we're seeing, whether we're seeing a spike in search volume for a particular keyword or key phrase. And then we'll talk a little bit more about what that actual market is, because it could be a little bit obscure or new. And then the third part will weigh in on our thoughts on it. Just a brief sentence or two about what kind of opportunity this could potentially provide to business owners who are looking for new opportunities. So that's the first part. Another section we'll get into is our marketplace data, which is where we share data from our marketplace, which can give a buyer or a seller an idea about the appetite on the overall marketplace. And we'll share information such as the number of listings published, the number of listings sold, the sold listings amount, the number of new unlocks, the number of accounts created, the added buyer liquidity, and the number of seller submissions. So then the next is the main story, and this can act as kind of like the pillar to that email or the big event. And so we try to look at what major event is going on in the online space that could have an impact on either buyers or sellers in the online industry. One recent example is just related to the logistics and supply chain issues happening in China. A lot of how the demand is decreasing for shipments and how that could impact current e-commerce sellers and essentially leading to delays or certain fluctuations in price and what they can do about that. So this is our way of providing awareness about what's going on and what business owners can do to take action on that information right now. In another section, we'll talk about the Opportunity Podcast. So it's going to be our recent speaker, and in that we'll include a summary of what that discussion was about and the takeaways from that, so people can still get the value from that interview without having to listen to the actual interview. But if they would like to get more detailed information, they can then click to listen to that podcast and be sent over in that direction. And the next section is our Hidden Gems section. So this is where we feature a business for that week. We'll talk about what that business is and why we're highlighting it for that week. And this tends to be one of our favorite sections for our readers, because without this newsletter, they're kind of on their own as far as looking through all of the different businesses and trying to evaluate for themselves which of those businesses are the hidden gems, because that's pretty much what every buyer is looking for when they're looking through that sea of businesses. So we're kind of assisting them in that process, and we're also teaching people, or we're educating buyers on how to evaluate businesses by pointing out why we are specifically, or what specifically we're looking at when we're determining what makes a hidden gem in the first place. And then another section would be some secondary stories. So there might be other stories that are actually mention worthy, so we'll include those. Sometimes they'll be in other niches, maybe for content site owners. If we just talked about an e-commerce topic, we'll talk about a Google algorithm update and what site owners can do in order to avoid their sites from being impacted. And these may or may not be in the newsletter. It just depends on if there is something that is newsworthy for that week. And the next section is company updates. So this is where we'll inform our audience about if we're hiring or if there's any changes that are going on within the company. Maybe we'll even update our commission structure. That happens very infrequently, but sometimes that can happen. We'll also talk about promotions that we're offering. Like we're offering for Shopify store owners, they get 25% off of the seller commissions if they list with us before December 31st. So that's an example of a promotion that we're running right now. And then next is the news snippets. So this is really just kind of like a quick bullet point, smaller news snippets. Maybe it'll be about Twitter and the certain changes that are happening right now with that company. Just certain things that are still interesting within the online space, but maybe don't deserve a full-on analysis and don't really have any takeaways for our direct audience, but still would be engaging or entertaining to know. Next is the sections to connect with our audience. So this is really to kind of show more of the human side of us. We can seem kind of robotic, or when you're just reading through an email newsletter or just seeing the website with all of these businesses, it can just look like a lot of text. Maybe some seller interviews are there, but this is our way of connecting more on a human level by showing people maybe where some of our teammates are traveling to, since we are a nomadic company, and that's kind of how we got our start, and that's what makes up a lot of our audience as well. And then we'll have something laugh-worthy, so this is where we'll post memes, and obviously this isn't going to take up a ton of the newsletter real estate, but it's just something at the end to just close the newsletter with something a little bit more lighthearted. And then last, we'll ask for feedback, and this tends to be one of the more important important parts of the newsletter for us because we'll be able to connect with the audience and they will know that their voice is being heard. But this also tells us if we're doing something that our audience doesn't like. For example, we did put out more GIFs and more memes and we just kind of cut back on that because our audience wasn't engaging as well with the amount of memes that we were posting. And another point is that we can get content ideas from our audience because they'll be asking us questions, and then that'll tell us that people are thinking about this and this is of interest, that they will ask us this question. So that will sometimes inform the content that we'll put out in the weeks to come. So we combine all of this information so that the reader feels like they're taking away a few things. One, that our information was valuable. Two, that it was important. Three, it's interesting, engaging, it's entertaining to read, and that it's relevant. So when we're able to accomplish that, that's when we get our audience returning to continue to read the newsletter. That's when we get new readers coming on. That's when we get people sharing our content. And that has only helped us to grow more as a company, especially when there's more competition, when there are economic factors that are causing people to become a little bit more hesitant about making purchases. So if you want a more detailed breakdown about everything that I described and more information that essentially helps you to dissect our newsletter, I'll leave a link in the description below, which includes the blog post on this and includes a lot more information. So the takeaway from this is building an email newsletter right can be transformative for certain businesses. Of course, you need to understand what your objectives are for your business and how a newsletter could potentially serve that. But we've seen from other companies and in our own experience that doing this right can really be powerful. And if you have an email newsletter right now that's making revenue, you could even potentially sell that on the Empire Flippers platform. And I will leave a link in the description below where you can click and go through that process of selling. And if you're interested in purchasing a content site where you could potentially add on an email newsletter to really grow that business, then I will leave a link below to our marketplace where you can look through the different content sites available for purchase. And if you're interested in how to sell a marketing agency, then click on this video. So that's all for now. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.